Inside us, believe the way. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. Where I'm born, where I'm born. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. Where I'm born. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. Where I'm born, where I'm born. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. Where I'm born.
Good morning. Woo. Great to be here with you. We start our service by ringing this bell. We ring this bell 3 times. The first is to call us into relationship with those to whom we owe a debt. Today, we pay homage to the people of color in this country who literally built this nation, including the White House and Wall Street. Without them, this place we call home would be poorer and very different. The second calls us into relationship with ourselves and one another, that we learn the many ways that we have to reframe the principles of this nation such that equality and not exploitation is the reason for our rise. And the third calls us into relationship with our children and our children's children out to the 7th generation, asking us to consider now what they will look back on and use to reference us and say, this is what my ancestors stood for, and this was the difference they made.
Good morning. I grew up in central Indiana in a very white, very conservative, very Protestant area. The only time I saw people of different races was when we went to Indianapolis for shopping or eating out for like a special occasion. And I didn't know anyone of color until I went to college. I was certainly aware of the racism that stubbornly remained deeply rooted in parts of my home state, but I was oblivious to the effects it had on people of color until a Black friend of mine from college came home with me one weekend. When we were followed through one small town by the police, I sensed the tension my friend felt, but I couldn't really empathize with her until many years later, when I came out as a lesbian and experienced it for myself. Throughout my career, I had a lot of opportunities to work with students from all over the world. As an educator and just a very curious person, I enjoyed meeting people who grew up so differently from me. However, it wasn't until the past 5 to 10 years that I really became aware of and interested in doing something about the racism and oppression in our world. The previous administration seemed to make it acceptable for people to openly express their hatred for those different from themselves. Sadly, we've continued to devolve into fear, anger, and hatred. Our lawmakers are even legislating this hatred, so it is important for us to stand up and be heard. We UUs must make it clear that this is not the kind of world in which we want to live, and work to make sure that this downward spiral does not continue. As a member of the Anti-Racism, Anti-Oppression Committee here at MPUUC, I've learned a lot about how to be an anti-racist, how to be more aware of my own implicit biases, and ways that I can be more actively involved in the fight against racism and oppression. The UA has also made this a priority. So they have proposed an 8th principle, which highlights the need to be more inclusive and to support our brothers and sisters of color. At our congregational meeting next month, we will be voting on the 8th principle, which I believe is essential to our continued growth as a congregation and to our original 7 principles. So I want to encourage everyone to join us after the service today for a conversation about this important step and at the congregational meeting to vote. It is imperative that we stand up to those who spread hate, and it's important that we take a stand with Black, Indigenous, people of color, and help make this world a safer and more inclusive place for all of us.
Good morning. Welcome to Mission Peak Unitarian Universalist Congregation. My name is Eric Ryan, and I'm a member of the board. We're so glad you've joined us this morning. Unitarian Universalism is a radically inclusive, non-doctrinal, non-dogmatic, open-minded, and open-hearted faith. We are people who are coming at truths from all different paths. We gather together across different identities, experiences, and beliefs to affirm and promote the inherent worth of every person. Together, we see it as our job to love the hate out of this world, heal the hurt in ourselves and in one another, and to be the change we'd like to see in this world. Today, we'll use the chat in Zoom or our Joys and Concerns book by the door if you're in person to share joys and concerns, personal milestones of importance that will be led around during the service. Maybe you're here for the first time. We've been reaching out and asking people to bring their friends because we think the world, especially now, needs some friendly places to gather and find encouragement and hope. We'll have a social hour after our service where we can visit with one another in breakout rooms or out on the patio. The worship host will give you more information immediately after the service. In the meantime, we'll put a link to our weekly newsletter in the chat so you can see all the events coming up. We encourage you to join anything that speaks to you. We'll also put our welcome email, welcome@mpuuc.org, and you can email that to request a newsletter or any information sent to us from our congregation. There are a few things I'd like to call your attention to today. Attendees in person should be masked inside and outside Cole Hall during the service, preferably with an N95 or a KN95 mask, which are more effective than cloth masks. We have such masks available at the welcome table at the back. Please help yourself. Eating and drinking are only allowed outside. Please do not attend inside Cole Hall if contracting COVID-19 is an unacceptable risk for you or the people near you. More information is on the bulletin board to your left and in this week's Week on the Peak email. And speaking of emails, please plan to attend our annual meeting on Sunday, June 5th. Members will be getting emails today with details regarding that. We also invite anyone who is interested to come after the service to a congregational conversation of deep listening to explore our upcoming vote on the U's 8th principle. The conversation will be in Greg's Zoom room, and the worship host will put some details in the chat immediately after the service. Finally, please silence any electronic devices other than the ones you're using to listen to the service. If you hear something today in this morning's service that inspires you or makes you laugh or brings you hope, please tweet it, share it on social media, or tell a friend. We are starting to start a wave of love and justice with every gathering. Thank you for joining us.
See that man all dressed in white, God's gonna trouble the water. The leader looks like an Israelite, God's gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. See that band all dressed in red, God's gonna trouble the water. It looks like the band that Moses led, God's gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water.
Please join me in reciting the words of our chalice lighting, which you will soon see on your screen. We light this chalice to remind ourselves to treat make it good, because it is our home,
Because it is our home.
to live lives full of goodness and love, because that is how we will become the best people we can be.
What up, y'all? My name is Kendrick Sampson, and I'm gonna be reading Anti-Racist Baby. Anti-racist baby is bred, not born. Anti-racist baby is raised to make society transform. Babies are taught to be racist or anti-racist. There's no neutrality. Take these 9 steps to make equity a reality. Number 1, open your eyes to all skin colors. Anti-racist baby learns all the colors, not because race is true. If you claim to be colorblind, you deny what's right in front of you. Number 2, use your words to talk about race. No one will see racism if we only stay silent. If we don't name racism, it won't stop being so violent. Number 3, point at policies as the problem, not the people. Some people get more while others get less because policies don't always grant equal access. Number 4, shout. There's nothing wrong with the people. Even though all races are not treated the same, we are all human, anti-racist baby can proclaim. Number 5, celebrate all our differences. You gotta celebrate, you gotta do a little celebration. Anti-racist baby doesn't see certain groups as better or worse. Anti-racist baby loves a world that's truly diverse. Number 6, knock down the stack of cultural blocks. Better knock them down. Anti-racist baby appreciates how groups speak, dance, create as they choose. Anti-Racist Baby welcomes all groups, voicing their unique views. Number 7, confess when being racist. Nothing disrupts racism more than when we confess the racist ideas that we sometimes express. Number 8, grow to be an anti-racist. Anti-Racist Baby is always learning, changing, and growing. Anti-Racist Baby stays curious about people and isn't all-knowing. Number 9, believe we shall overcome racism. Anti-Racist Baby is filled with the power to transcend, my friend, and doesn't judge a book by its cover, but reads until the end.
When you just testified a minute ago that you didn't know if critical race theory was taught in K through 12, I will confess I find that statement a little hard to reconcile with the public record, because if you look at the Georgetown Day School's curriculum, it is filled and overflowing with critical race theory. That among the books that are either assigned or recommended, they include Critical Race Theory, an introduction. They include The End of Policing, an advocacy for abolishing police. They include How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. They include literally stacks and stacks of books, and I'll tell you two of the ones that were most stunning. They include a book called Anti-Racist Baby by Ibram Kendi. And there are portions of this book that I find really quite remarkable. One portion of the book says babies are taught to be racist or anti-racist. There is no neutrality. Another portion of the book, they recommend to babies confess when being racist. Now, this is a book that is taught at Georgetown Day School to students in pre-K through second grade, so 4 through 7 years old. Do you agree with this book that is being taught with kids that babies are racist?
Senator, I do not believe that any child should be made to feel as though they are racist, or though they are not valued, or though they are less than, that they are victims, that they are oppressors. I don't believe in any of that. But what I will say is that when you asked me whether or not this was taught in schools, critical race theory, my understanding is that critical race theory as an academic theory is taught in law schools. And to the extent that you were asking the question, I understood you to be addressing public schools. Georgetown Day School, just like the religious school that Justice Barrett was on the board of, is a private school.
Okay, so you agree critical race theory is taught at Georgetown Day School?
I don't know, because the board is not, the board does not control the curriculum. The board does not focus on that. That's not what we do as board members. So I'm actually not sure.
Well, are you comfortable with these ideas being taught to children as young as 4 in respect to the first book, as young as 8 and 9 in respect to the second book?
Senator, I have not reviewed any of those books, any of those ideas. They don't come up in my work as a judge, which I'm respectfully here to address.
We come together every Sunday and all throughout the week for more than we come to support one another and the ministries that infuse worth and dignity into our children, our youth, our programs of learning and leadership, and our ministries in the larger world, including our efforts toward anti-racism and anti-oppression. Please make a contribution towards these worthy causes by mailing your check to Mission Peak UU congregation at the address on the screen. You can also use the bill pay option in your online banking or drop your check into the Mission Peak mail slot or pay online with a credit or debit card. Thank you for supporting and sustaining the efforts of our members, friends, and staff. Your contributions make loving, learning, and leadership more possible.
One of the things that gives us hope, especially in the more difficult times, is the comfort of knowing that we are in one another's hearts. If you have a joy or concern that might bring some hope or some resilience in your life, help you, remind you that you are not alone, we invite you to, if you are with us online, to write something in the chat. And if you are here in person, there is a book back there. We invite you to share your joys and concerns. These will be read aloud so that we can be one family of sharing one another's hopes, hurts, and dreams. If you would like to drop a stone into our stone garden as a silent witness to the events that are going on in your life, music will be played. We invite you to come up stage right and exit stage left. If your joy or concern is more personal, please come to me or to Reverend Barber, and we would love to have a conversation with you. These are the joys and concerns that are on our hearts today. And finally, a great joy and appreciation for the Arrow team of this community, the anti-racist, anti-oppression team, who has done such incredibly good work all year round. And they have helped put together this service. For these joys and concerns and the ones that still remain in the silent sanctuary of our hearts, we keep our hearts, our minds, our doors, and our arms open. We, the members of Mission Peak Unitarian Universalist Congregation, make a spiritual and moral commitment to hold ourselves accountable to create a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by dismantling racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. Thus, we endorse the 8th Principle Project's recommendation that the UUA amend Article 2 of the UUA's bylaws to add an additional principle focusing on anti-racism and anti-oppression. What I just read was the motion that is coming before the congregation in 2 weeks at the June 5th congregational meeting. We discussed it this past week at our midweek discussion group, and someone pointed out that the motion, as it is worded, and the 8th principle itself feels a little bit different than some of the other principles, like it's calling for more accountability than any of the other 7 principles. I asked, what makes you say that? What makes it seem more accountable? Well, it's the word accountable in the motion, they said. And I nodded, that will definitely do it. I have a long, uncomfortable history with that word. I was raised by countercultural, non-conforming parents. Accountability felt somehow connected to authority, and authority was rarely a comforting image in our home. As a family, we considered ourselves, I think, to be bootstrappers, which means that my parents identified as pulling themselves up out of poverty into education, into the working world. Autonomy was honored for us. Independence was celebrated. What community we did had was almost always Unitarian. That is to say, it was with people who had the same skittish avoidance of authority as we did. Our church that we attended prided itself on breaking from biblical authority. It had a practice of holding organized religion at arm's length, and we reflexively distrusted authority, including most of our own know-it-all ministers. There's a reading about accountability that I heard at a meeting this week, a meeting of denominational leaders, and it says this: what if accountability wasn't scary? It will never be easy or comfortable, but what if it wasn't scary? What if our own accountability wasn't something that we ran from, but something we ran towards? What if we cherished opportunities to take accountability as a path of liberation, to practice love, to practice becoming the kinds of people and the kinds of elders we want to be? This reading is from Mia Mingus. Mia Mingus is a writer, educator, and trainer of transformative and disability justice. She is a queer, physically disabled, Korean, transracial, and transnational adoptee raised in the Caribbean. She wrote this piece because her work depends on people working accountably together. And she asks us to join her in that work, to help her, to be part of some of the accountability that might keep her safe, keep her alive. For years, I was reflexively against accountability and authority, largely because I'd been hurt. I'd had my trust broken. I lived through betrayals. I told myself that it wasn't possible to trust authority. But years of therapy and years of encountering others who'd been hurt and betrayed taught me something else. First, it taught me that it is possible to trust authority, but first I needed to find something that mattered to me enough to make me willing to accept some sort of leadership myself, to become part of authority. And then second, I needed to be trustworthy. But I wasn't always raised with the best care. I saw poor boundaries so often, I developed poor boundaries myself, even leading me to perpetuate harm. Part of what I needed to do was to learn to trust myself again, trust myself to make better decisions, trust myself to survive setbacks. Mia Mingus goes on, we could start with self-accountability, the ways that we don't show up for ourselves. We can acknowledge how most of us are in abusive relationships with ourselves. We blow past our own boundaries. We name call to ourselves. We punish and beat ourselves up in terrible ways that we'd recognize as abuse if we saw it being done to someone else. After all, our abusive relationship with ourselves lays the groundwork for an abusive world. I eventually came upon people who helped me see how it could be different. What love looked like when it wasn't connected to ulterior motives or unhealed reactive pain. They showed me that reaching out to me was part of their leadership, that love itself could be an authority, something to which we could all joyfully be accountable. Again, Mia Mingus. What if we embraced accountability as a reflection of our undeniable, incredible, tender humanity, as a magnificent example of what it means to be human and flawed and in relationship with one another? What if we thought of accountability as a response to the fear of losing trust with someone important to us? What if we thought everyone was important to us? I understand. Accountability is scary. Authority is hard to trust. Healing is essential, but not easy. But getting to that place where everyone is important, where everyone matters, that kind of transformation requires accountability.
starry skies. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast taught us the star on the way, thou who hast by thy mind led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places of God where we met thee, lest our hearts drunk with the wine of the world we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
Hi, everybody. It is really wonderful to be here with you all, even virtually. So since November, I've been participating in Rewire, and I'm grateful for the support that the class provides, because this anti-racism journey can be really uncomfortable. And last month's topic, white culture, was deeply humbling. We read from two books, Waking Up White by Debbie Irving and Witnessing Whiteness by Shelley Totchlick. Irving's book is a reflection on her own personal experience, and Totchlick's is more an analysis of broader cultural patterns, but they both offer similar descriptions of white paradigms, white behavior, and the insidious effects of white paradigms and white behavior. And I got to tell you, I started my reading with an ample dose of skepticism. But the more I read, I could recognize white culture as a cultural phenomenon. I could see those white traits in myself. I could imagine how white behaviors make life harder for people of color. And then I could connect the dots to see how our beloved congregation exhibits white culture. Let me share some of my new realizations in a spirit of love, without any intent to shame. My goal is to raise our awareness so that we can make conscious choices. For illustration, here are just 4 of the dozen or so characteristics of white culture that Irving and Totchlick describe. Let's see if we can see ourselves. 1 is conflict avoidance. Yep. Conflict avoidance is an impediment for me in my life. Even preparing this homily, I struggled to figure out how to express myself directly for fear of upsetting someone. And I think conflict avoidance is a problem here at Mission Peak. We are so nice. But if we hold back from revealing what we truly think or feel, then we thwart our own learning, our creativity, our authenticity, our connections, our sense of trust. 2, valuing formal education and being knowledgeable. Oh yeah, I relish a heady intellectual discussion. That's part of what I love about you all. Look around. this is a well-educated group. But the shadow side is that if we prioritize academic understanding over other forms of wisdom, like life experience, that can be really off-putting. I got to ask myself, do I carry an arrogance about my smarts? In my heart, I don't mean to, but maybe I give off that vibe. Do we as a group perhaps give the impression that educational credentials are an entrance requirement? A third hallmark of white culture is a sense of urgency about getting things done. As a project manager, results orientation is a trait I've had to work to develop in myself. And here at Mission Peak, we have an amazing capacity to accomplish things. And it really serves us most of the time. But viewing this as a classic element of white culture makes me ponder. Does our focus on content, getting stuff done, sometimes come at the expense of relationships or depth of experience or fun? And how welcoming would that feel for someone who maybe values process over content? Fourth, emotional restraint. Now, y'all know I'm a crier, so I might be one of the more sensitive and expressive members of our congregation. And still, I tend to be in my head. As a group, logic is our comfort zone. I know what big hearts we have. And yet, do other folks experience us as aloof? These are just 4 of the constellation of traits associated with white culture. And these very aspects of white culture that I've talked about are part of what I love about us. And seeing our behaviors as quintessentially white is clarifying. For instance, it explains our congregational demographics. It's also insight that we can use to be more attuned to our impact on others. Conversely, if we remain unaware, if we don't realize that we're acting in alignment with our conditioning as members of the dominant culture, then we won't even notice how tightly we expect new people to assimilate, or the barriers to belonging that we inadvertently create. As Maya Angelou said, do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better. We want a nonviolent, just, and sustainable world for all people. And that will require freeing ourselves from the racial conditioning that we've been steeped in for our entire lives. Liberational work is not for cowards, nor ideally for isolated souls. If we truly aspire to be inclusive, then we need to be aware and humble and intentional and brave together. The 8th principle will help us set our intention. And together, we could be the change we want to see in the world.
I have had a priority in my life for the last several years of doing something about racism. And I finally got it that if I don't do something, I'm complicit. So I've been taking a number of trainings. I was part of the Rewire class that Terry talked about. I also had another training that was very intensive on a weekly basis, doing a lot of things. And that training asked us at the beginning to pick one of the characteristics of white supremacy culture and work on it. And the one I picked was conflict avoidance. You heard Terry talking about that. So what I decided to do is to try as an experiment is that the next time that I was in some sort of conflict with someone, that I, instead of moving away from it, which is sort of a lifelong habit of mine, I'm now 75, so it's taken a while, it's been there with me for a long time. Instead of moving away, that I would move toward it with curiosity, not with an intention to fight with anybody, but in turn, just to listen to what the other person was saying. So the next time that a situation like that came up for me, it was in one of the groups that I'm in the denomination. I realized that somebody was angry at me after one of the Zoom meetings that I was in. And so I contacted her and said, I think you're angry with me and I'd like to talk to you about it. And she didn't respond at all. So then I said, I'm going to stick with this. So I told her, I'm not trying to criticize you. I just want to understand something and see if we can solve the problem. So then she engaged with me. And I said, I just want to understand where you're coming from. And she took some time and explained it to me. I thought, she has a point. And together we worked out a solution that was much better than anything I could have come up with. So instead of my normal behavior, which is backing away and stewing about it and staying up at night worrying about it, I went towards it, and she and I came up with something which is much better than either one of us would have come up with, certainly fighting with each other. So it not only improved the immediate situation, not carrying it with me helped me sleep better at night. And in fact, now that I've practiced this several times on several different occasions, my mental health has improved. And you all know that has been one of the things I've been working on for most of my life. So I discovered that conflict avoidance is bad for everyone. It's not just bad for people who are minorities, who we might be offending. It's bad for everyone else, too. This is also true of perfectionism, which is another one of the things on the list, but I'd already been working on perfectionism before. So, and I'm wondering if this is true with a lot of other things that are on the list, that in fact, they hurt everyone as much as they hurt other people that we think we might be hurting. So I just want to plant that in your mind, that working on some of these habits might be better for everyone. Thank you.
Good morning. When I was in high school, we would often gather together in a loosely knit circle of friends and acquaintances. Sometimes we ate lunch together. Sometimes we crammed for exams the next period. Other times we shared teenage concerns. I was standing in one of those groups outside our high school waiting for classes to start when a boy whose family had recently immigrated from Norway joined our group. He was tall, blonde, and funny, and easy to like. He told us an old joke that I had not heard for many years until I read it again recently. He asked, "What do you call two old Black people in the middle of a farm?" The answer, antique farm equipment. I was surprised and I was hurt. I pulled him aside and I asked with concern, but not anger, "Was that a joke about slavery? It's not funny." He replied that when he had been told the joke, everyone had laughed. Wasn't slavery a long time ago? He and his family didn't have anything to do with slavery, so I shouldn't be angry with him and I shouldn't make him feel bad. In his relatively short time in our country, he had learned two important lessons. First, it's okay to make fun of the lower caste group. And second, he had learned to be fragile and justify his actions. He had not been wrong in hurting marginalized people. He was the victim who should have not been made to feel bad for his actions. I don't think I said anything more at the time. I felt hurt, but also embarrassed and confused. Maybe I'd done something wrong. Maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe I should not have said anything. Unfortunately, this was only one of many times that I've experienced similar interactions and doubts. Years later, I learned that what I experienced was called justification. I learned justification as a mental mechanism. The following is from Psych Central. Justification is not the same as sociopathic misuse of others, lying to others, or making excuses for mistakes or harmful actions to another. Self-justification is a defense against feeling badly about ourselves by convincing ourselves that what we did was the best thing we could do. Self-justification is a way to reduce cognitive dissonance caused by what we did or what we need to believe. It is powerful, emotionally driven, and it sits just beneath consciousness, which is what makes it so dangerous. When we need blind spots in order to be right, then we are stuck. We are imprisoned by rigidity of thinking. We won't hear our spouses, our children, or those who confront us. They also become stuck in our biases. There'll be no opportunity to ask forgiveness, make amends, or start again. There'll be no lessons learned or changes in our life path. Is there another way? If we suspend self-justification to tolerate the dissonance of being wrong, of seeing the other's perspective, of accepting blame, we will lose the illusion of control. We will give others a voice. We will let them touch us. We will gain the freedom to be human, fallible, capable of growing and knowing ourselves and others. When we have the courage to see what is discrepant in our version of ourselves or our version of the world, we have a chance to feel mutual trust in unexpected places. Unquote. It is painful to hear about the harm that we have done and continue to do to other people. We get tired of hearing it. Sometimes we even pass laws so our children don't have to hear it or learn about it. But if we are not willing to acknowledge it, we can't move on to a more positive and inclusive future. What if things had been different? What if I'd been willing to help my classmate see his actions were harmful? What if he had been willing to acknowledge that he could do better? I can't help think that this would have led to his being happier, healthier, better adjusted, strictly from the perspective of his mental health. But in addition, he would be better positioned to heal his family, friends, and community. We strive for a community where we hold each other accountable, when our actions, words, or even inactions harm others or don't promote our values. Not because we're punitive or self-righteous, but because we care for each other deeply, even love each other. We would work together to grow into our best selves, the best people we can be. The 8th principle of Unitarian Universalism is the embodiment of this work that we are doing together. It says that we are journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. I think we at Mission Peak are well on our way to becoming this beloved community. In 2020, we voted almost unanimously to educate ourselves about anti-racism and anti-oppression. We have learned new information as well as unlearned false and misleading beliefs from our past. Together, we are lovingly working toward widening the circle of concern. Thank you.
Have been wrong for far too long, but I didn't understand. I was laid by plan that can only work while people like us don't make a fuss. 'Cause when we just pray for things to improve, we don't get in their way. They can do as they choose. So if we want justice, we gotta get on the move. So go find your marching shoes. Go find your marching shoes and put on your marching shoes. 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 Yeah, put on your marching shoes. Put on your marching shoes. Put on your marching shoes. We'll stop preaching to the choir and seek out those who thirst for change. We won't look away, we'll say our say. At first that might feel strange, but keep this thought in mind. Time you're walking out your door, you'll be following a deep one path. You used that road before, so they needed
had marching shoes. And now we need marching shoes. So go find your marching shoes and put on your marching shoes. Put on your marching shoes. Put on your marching shoes. We'll put on our marching shoes. 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 On our marching shoes. Oh yes, we will. And there's a lot of ways to do it. For instance, you can march on Facebook or march carrying a sign, or by offering child care to help someone else join our line. Share your truth with strangers, being patient, being kind, to end the evil being done in their names, yours and mine. Oh, they'll need marching shoes. Children, they will need marching shoes. So help them find marching shoes. Help them find marching shoes. And put on those marching shoes. Put on those marching shoes. Put on those marching shoes. Put on their marching shoes. Put on their marching shoes. Put on their marching shoes. On their marching shoes. Otherwise, their feet will kill them. Why don't you bring along your sister, your brother, and your friend? Let them know that this is what our nation needs to mend. Teach them what they need to know to help them spread the news, and how to stand nonviolent in their brand new marching shoes. Warn them, they'll need marching shoes, because they will need marching shoes. So put on your marching shoes. Put on your marching shoes. Yeah, put on your marching shoes. 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 Put on your marching shoes.
That was written, produced, performed by Nudie Van Hoven. And I think the video was done by Paul, but was fantastic. Please join together in reciting these words to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Friends, reach out, put a hand on your heart and another out in promise to one another, to the world around us, and ask ourselves this question from Mia Mingus: what if accountability wasn't scary? What if it was something that we ran to instead of from? What if accountability marked the path to liberation, began a practice of love? And what if someday it all became a clear expression of our undeniable, incredible, tender humanity? What if we were not what if people, but accountably tender, loving people? Let us begin that becoming. Thank you for joining us here in this service. We are going to begin a congregational conversation around the 8th principle motion. For those of you who are really very crystal clear about that topic and don't feel like you need to be in the conversation, it is not a forced march. You can join one of the congregational, or you can join one of the breakout rooms. But we do have my breakout room that's now going in the chat, which we invite you to jump into, and we'll have an hour-long opportunity for us to kind of explore deeper if we have any questions or concerns about the 8th principle, that we can do that work together. So I look forward to talking to you in a few minutes.